Not only was Russia justified to take over Crimea, but they were justified to invade Ukraine. I know there's going to be a ton of people who clip just that part. And they're going to be like, oh, he's a Putin puppet. Well, please recognize I'm not saying this is my opinion. I'm saying it because international treaty says so. So look, just give me about a minute to explain, and then you're welcome to try to destroy my argument. When the Soviet Union broke apart in 1991, creation of all the nations that used to be part of the Soviet Union became what was known as the CIS. That is the Commonwealth of Independent States. And the founding and management of all those countries was really controlled by two things. One being the rules of the CIS. Second being the Belovezh Accords. Okay, so here's where Crimea comes into play. So back before 2014, Crimea was its own independent country. It was called like the Autonomous Republic of Crimea or something like that. And then one day, their government just fucking bounced. Like they all just said, we don't want to do this anymore. Now, when that happened, Ukraine tried to claim that Crimea was part of their country. But that's not what the CIS and the Belovezh Accord say. See, under those governing documents, any nation that used to be part of the Soviet Union, if they fail to be able to defend themselves or enforce their sovereignty, they are supposed to revert back to Russia. Again, this is not an opinion. You are welcome to look this up yourself. So when Ukraine tried to claim Crimea, they were violating international treaty. They violated the rules of the CIS and the Belovezh Accords. And Russia went into Crimea in 2014. They were completely valid and justified under those documents. So by international treaty, Russia is supposed to get them back. Now, when it comes to Ukraine, it's a little more complicated. Because again, by Ukraine claiming Crimea as part of their country, they were the ones that were actually in violation of international treaty. By any international standard whatsoever, Ukraine had no claim to Crimea. But again, that's not even the biggest problem. Because Russia was like, we're taking it, you can't fucking do anything about it anyway. The real problem was when Ukraine started negotiating with NATO to become a member. And again, that's something that's not allowed both under the CIS and the Belovezh Accords. See, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, they already had an international treaty that said they cannot join NATO. Ukraine and NATO kept fucking trying anyway. And look, I get this shit gets real murky because NATO powers promised Ukraine that if it got rid of their nuclear weapons, we'd protect them. But again, they weren't allowed to do that. Like that treaty offering the protection of NATO and possible membership violated the prior treaty that Ukraine had with Russia. Now, Ukraine tried to sidestep that by going, Russia already violated the treaty by invading Crimea. But they didn't, because by that very same treaty, any nation that was a former member of the Soviet Union that defaults is supposed to revert back to Russia's control. Like, look, I get it. It's a complicated ass issue. But the simple thing is this. Long before the Western nations promised to protect Ukraine if they gave up their weapons, there already existed the CIS and the Belovezh Accords. And under those accords, Russia gets Crimea. So Ukraine doesn't get to claim that they get to work with NATO because Russia violated the accords, which is the only basis they have to actually try to get into NATO. So yeah, Russia was justified to invade both Crimea and Ukraine because according to CIS and the Belovezh Accords, it was supposed to go back to them anyway. And they have a right to invade Ukraine because Ukraine is openly violating that same treaty by negotiating with NATO. So look, I get it. It sucks that Russia invaded Ukraine, but according to international law and international treaty, they were 100% justified.